Leaked interrogation footage shows Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law crumbling under FBI pressure. 6 hours of psychological warfare as agents play the traced phone call proving his guilt. His face goes pale when they show his text messages planning the kidnapping. He tries blaming his cousin Marcus. He claims his laptop was hacked. Every lie falls apart as evidence stacks against him. Then agents tell him Nancy is dying without medications and he's facing murder charges. Subscribe immediately because what happens next in this interrogation will shock you. His final admission about Nancy's location changes everything. The leaked interrogation footage begins with Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law being led into a stark FBI interview room at 5:30 a.m., approximately 1 hour after his arrest during the SWAT raid at his home. He's still wearing the pajamas he was sleeping in when agents breached his door, and he appears disheveled, confused, and attempting to project an air of innocent bewilderment about why he's been brought in for questioning. 2 FBI agents enter the room. The lead interrogator, a veteran investigator with decades of experience breaking suspects, and a second agent who remains largely silent but takes detailed notes throughout the session. The lead agent begins with standard Miranda warnings, which the son-in-law waives, confident he can talk his way out of the situation and believing that requesting a lawyer would make him appear guilty. This decision would prove catastrophic as the interrogation progressed. The son-in-law's opening statement sets the tone for his initial defense strategy: complete denial and manufactured shock. "I have absolutely no idea why I'm here. This is insane. I would never hurt Nancy. She's my mother-in-law. I love her like my own mother. I've been desperately worried about her since she disappeared." His voice carries practiced sincerity, and his body language appears open and cooperative. Leaning forward, maintaining eye contact, hands visible on the table, he's clearly rehearsed this performance, anticipating that he might eventually be questioned and preparing responses that would establish his innocence. When asked to recount the evening of Nancy's disappearance, he provides the timeline he'd given to investigators days earlier with impressive consistency. Nancy had dinner at his and Annie's home. They played games. She was in great spirits, and around 9:45 p.m. he volunteered to drive her home because it was dark and he wanted to ensure she arrived safely. He describes walking her to her front door, waiting until he heard her lock it behind her, and then driving away feeling good that she was secure for the night. His recollection includes specific details designed to enhance credibility: what Nancy wore that evening, which games they played, what she ate for dinner, conversations they had about upcoming family events. The level of detail suggests either genuine memory or carefully constructed fiction meant to appear authentic. Throughout this initial phase, the son-in-law maintains remarkable composure. He answers questions calmly, doesn't appear nervous or defensive, and even asks the agents questions about the investigation's progress, portraying himself as a concerned family member eager to help find Nancy rather than a suspect trying to avoid culpability. Approximately 90 minutes into the interrogation, after the son-in-law had repeated his innocent narrative multiple times with increasing confidence, the lead FBI agent signals to his partner, who produces a laptop computer and audio playback equipment. The agent's demeanor shifts from conversational information gathering to confrontational accusation as he announces, "We're going to play something for you now, and I want you to listen very carefully." The footage shows the son-in-law's initial reaction, mild curiosity mixed with continued confidence, as if he's genuinely interested in what evidence the FBI might have, but unconcerned it could implicate him. That confidence evaporates within seconds of the audio playback beginning. The speakers emit the traced phone call from the burner phone to the son-in-law's cell phone at 2:47 a.m. The conversation where the kidnapper discusses Nancy's deteriorating condition, the failed ransom plan, and the question of what to do with her now that the situation has spiraled out of control. The son-in-law's voice is unmistakably clear on the recording, responding to the burner phone caller with familiarity and discussing logistics that only someone intimately involved in Nancy's kidnapping would know. The physical transformation visible in the interrogation footage is dramatic and immediate. The color literally drains from the son-in-law's face as he recognizes his own voice on the recording. His hands, which had been resting calmly on the table, begin trembling noticeably. He sits back in his chair, his previous forward-leaning cooperative posture replaced by defensive withdrawal. His eyes dart between the two agents, searching for some escape or explanation, finding neither. When the recording ends, silence fills the room for several long seconds captured on the footage. The lead agent breaks the silence with a simple, devastating question. "That's your voice, isn't it?" The son-in-law attempts to deny it initially, stammering, "That doesn't sound like me, and I don't know what that is," but the weakness in his voice betrays that he knows these denials are futile. The agents play the recording again, this time stopping at specific points to identify statements that clearly demonstrate coordination with Nancy's kidnapper. The son-in-law shifts strategies, attempting a new explanation. The call was about something else entirely, some other situation unrelated to Nancy, and investigators are misinterpreting the conversation by assuming it references the kidnapping when it was actually about business matters or personal issues with his cousin Marcus. The agents allow the son-in-law's weak explanation about the phone call being misinterpreted to hang in the air for a moment before methodically destroying it with the next category of evidence. The second agent produces a thick folder containing printed copies of text message exchanges between the son-in-law's phone and Marcus's phone, spanning 3 weeks before Nancy's disappearance through the night she was taken. The lead agent begins reading selected messages aloud while sliding printed copies across the table for the son-in-law to see. Thursday night works best. Her routine is predictable. You'll need to disable the doorbell camera first thing. I'll tell you exactly where it is. The back door is the weak point. Front door has too much security. She takes sleeping pills around 10 p.m. Give it an hour after that. Each message read aloud chips away at any remaining pretense of innocence. The son-in-law's face shows the progressive realization that his digital communications have created an irrefutable record of his planning and coordination of Nancy's kidnapping. The messages are too specific, too detailed, and too clearly referential to Nancy and her home to be explained away as discussing anything else. His initial response is to claim his phone must have been hacked, that someone else gained access to his device and sent these messages to frame him. The agents immediately counter this explanation with forensic evidence. Cell tower records show the phone was at locations consistent with the son-in-law's known whereabouts when messages were sent: at his workplace, at his home, at restaurants where credit card records confirm his presence. The timestamps of messages align with his daily routine and movements in ways that would be impossible for a hacker to replicate without physically possessing his phone constantly. The son-in-law then pivots to suggesting Marcus must have somehow spoofed or fabricated the messages, creating fake evidence to implicate him. This explanation also crumbles when agents point out that the messages exist not just on Marcus's phone, but on the cell phone carrier's servers, on the son-in-law's own device, and in backup records that forensic analysis confirms are authentic and unaltered. The technical evidence of message authenticity is overwhelming and undeniable. The footage shows the son-in-law slumping in his chair, his defensive explanations running out, his face showing the dawning realization that the digital trail he created while planning Nancy's kidnapping has become the evidence that will convict him. 3 hours into the interrogation, with the son-in-law's initial defenses thoroughly demolished by phone and text message evidence, FBI agents shift focus to establishing motive by walking him through the financial trail that explains why he orchestrated his mother-in-law's kidnapping. The lead agent produces bank statements, withdrawal receipts, and financial documents obtained through warrants executed immediately after the arrest. The evidence paints a devastating picture of a man in complete financial collapse who viewed Nancy's death as his only salvation. The agents begin by asking straightforward questions about the son-in-law's financial situation, giving him opportunities to explain before confronting him with documentation. How would you describe your current financial health? The son-in-law attempts to downplay his money problems, claiming some temporary cash flow issues, but nothing serious or desperate. This minimization strategy falls apart when agents slide across bank statements showing his checking account overdrawn by thousands of dollars, credit cards maxed out with minimum payments in arrears, and notices of default on his mortgage, threatening foreclosure within 60 days. The questioning focuses on a series of large cash withdrawals totaling $30,000 made in the 3 weeks before Nancy disappeared. What did you need $30,000 in cash for? The son-in-law's explanations shift repeatedly, first claiming business expenses that required cash payments, then suggesting the money went toward home repairs, finally admitting he can't remember exactly where all the cash went because he wasn't keeping careful records. None of these explanations are remotely credible for someone who's broke and facing foreclosure suddenly withdrawing such large sums. Agents present financial analysis showing the son-in-law's debts exceeded $250,000 when combining credit cards, personal loans, business debts, and the mortgage arrears. His income from his struggling business ventures was barely covering monthly expenses, leaving him no ability to pay down principal on any debts. Bankruptcy filings were being drafted by an attorney he'd consulted, though he'd held off filing in hopes of finding another solution to his financial crisis. That solution, agents suggest, was Nancy's estate. Documents obtained from Nancy's attorney show her existing will left her multi-million-dollar estate divided equally between her two daughters. If Nancy died before changing her will, Annie would inherit approximately $2 million that would legally become marital property shared with her husband, instantly solving all his financial problems. But Nancy had scheduled an appointment with her attorney to execute a new will that would have reduced Annie's inheritance significantly, cutting off the son-in-law's access to that money. The interrogation reaches a critical turning point when FBI agents introduce evidence from the son-in-law's personal laptop, seized during the SWAT raid and immediately analyzed by digital forensic specialists. The search history recovered from the laptop, even after the son-in-law had supposedly deleted his browsing records, provides a horrifying window into his criminal planning and reveals a man who researched kidnapping and murder with the same casual approach someone might use to plan a vacation. The lead agent reads the search queries aloud from a printed report, each one more damning than the last. How to kidnap someone without leaving evidence, Bitcoin ransom anonymous payment, how long can elderly person survive without medication, disposing of a body in Arizona desert, life sentence for kidnapping versus murder. The searches span a 3-week period immediately before Nancy's disappearance, showing progressive planning and research into multiple aspects of the crime. The son-in-law's initial response is to claim he was researching for a crime novel he was planning to write, a creative project he'd been working on privately and hadn't mentioned to anyone, including his wife. The agent's response is devastating in its simplicity. You've never written anything. You're not a writer. You don't have any manuscript files on this computer or any notes about a novel, but you do have searches about your mother-in-law's medication schedule and her home security system made from this same device on the same days as these kidnapping searches. The forensic timeline shows the son-in-law's searches becoming increasingly specific and practically oriented as Nancy's planned attorney appointment approached. Early searches were general information gathering about kidnapping methods and ransom collection. Later searches focused on specific technical details like disabling doorbell cameras, bypassing home alarm systems, and finding accomplices for criminal activities. The most disturbing searches occurred in the 72 hours before Nancy disappeared, focusing on scenarios where kidnapped victims died during captivity and the legal differences between kidnapping charges and murder charges. The son-in-law attempts to invoke his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent at this point, finally recognizing that continuing to offer explanations is only digging his hole deeper. But the damage is done. He's already spent 3 hours making statements, offering explanations, and creating a record of lies that can be used against him. The agents inform him that his right to silence doesn't erase the previous hours of recorded interrogation where he repeatedly lied and contradicted himself. 4.5 hours into the interrogation, with overwhelming evidence systematically presented and every explanation demolished, the son-in-law's psychological defenses begin crumbling in ways visible on the leaked footage. His physical deterioration is obvious. Slumped posture, exhaustion evident in his face, hands that won't stop trembling, and a defeated demeanor replacing the confident innocence he projected at the interrogation start. The lead FBI agent recognizes the suspect is reaching a breaking point and shifts tactics from aggressive confrontation to a more sympathetic approach designed to elicit confession. This is a classic interrogation technique. After hours of battering the suspect with evidence, the interrogator becomes the understanding ally who offers a pathway to redemption through confession. The agent's tone softens noticeably as he leans back in his chair and speaks in a more conversational manner. Look, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen a lot of people in your situation. Things start as one thing and they spiral into something else you never intended. Maybe you just wanted to scare Nancy a little, get her to reconsider the will changes. Maybe you thought Marcus would just hold her for a day or two and then let her go once she agreed to leave the will alone. Things got out of hand. It happens. But right now, Nancy is out there somewhere. She's 84 years old. She doesn't have her medications, and she's suffering. You can stop that suffering. You can do the right thing here. This empathetic framing offers the son-in-law a psychological exit ramp, a way to confess while maintaining some dignity by characterizing the kidnapping as an accident or something that escalated beyond his intentions rather than a coldly planned crime. The footage shows him responding to this approach, his rigid defensiveness softening slightly, his eyes welling with tears for the first time during the interrogation. The suspect's first crack in his complete denial comes when he admits, I knew Marcus was having financial problems. I gave him some money to help out. This seems like a minor admission, but it's significant because it's the first time he's acknowledged any connection between himself, Marcus, and money during the relevant time period. The agent gently pushes further. You gave Marcus money. How much? Maybe 20,000. I don't know exactly. This admission contradicts his earlier claims of not remembering where the cash withdrawals went and begins establishing that he was financially supporting Marcus immediately before the kidnapping. Once the son-in-law admitted to giving Marcus substantial money shortly before Nancy's kidnapping, he attempted to construct a new narrative that acknowledged his connection to Marcus while deflecting all criminal culpability onto his cousin. This blame-shifting strategy became his fallback position now that complete denial was no longer credible given the mountain of evidence. The leaked footage shows him building this alternative story piece by piece, trying to portray himself as a victim of Marcus's manipulation rather than the mastermind of the kidnapping plot. Marcus came to me desperate for money. He was behind on rent, facing eviction. I felt sorry for him because we're family. I gave him cash to help him get back on his feet. I had no idea what he was planning to do. The son-in-law's version of events painted Marcus as an unstable criminal who had developed an obsession with Nancy's wealth and hatched the kidnapping scheme independently, perhaps using information about Nancy that he'd overheard during family conversations. Marcus must have been watching the house, following Nancy, planning this on his own. Maybe he thought he could get ransom money and I'd never know I was being set up. Those text messages, maybe he sent them from my phone when I wasn't looking. Or maybe he faked them somehow to make it look like I was involved so I couldn't go to police. The agents let him spin this narrative for several minutes before systematically destroying it with evidence the son-in-law didn't know they possessed. Here's the problem with your story. We have Marcus in the next room, and he's telling us something very different. He says you approached him with the kidnapping plan, offered him $50,000 to grab Nancy and hold her until she died without her medications or until you could collect ransom. He's providing extremely specific details about conversations you had, locations where you met to plan, and instructions you gave him about Nancy's home and routine. Details he couldn't possibly know unless you told him. The visible shock on the son-in-law's face confirms he didn't anticipate Marcus cooperating with investigators. Criminals often believe in loyalty among conspirators, assuming their accomplices will stay silent rather than betray them. Learning that Marcus was actively providing testimony destroyed the son-in-law's blame-shifting strategy. The agents presented additional evidence contradicting his narrative. Security footage from a restaurant showing him and Marcus meeting privately multiple times in the weeks before Nancy's disappearance. Witness statements from the restaurant staff who overheard them discussing a job and taking care of a problem, and financial records showing the son-in-law had promised Marcus payment beyond the $30,000 already provided. With his attempts to blame Marcus completely dismantled by evidence and Marcus's own cooperation with investigators, the son-in-law shifted to a carefully parsed partial confession designed to admit enough involvement to appear cooperative while minimizing his legal culpability. This strategy of admitting to lesser offenses while denying the most serious charges is common among suspects who recognize complete denial is no longer viable but aren't ready to fully confess. The leaked interrogation footage shows him choosing his words with extreme care, speaking slowly and deliberately as he tried to construct admissions that wouldn't constitute full confession to kidnapping or attempted murder. Okay, maybe Marcus and I talked hypothetically about what would happen if Nancy died before changing her will. That's not illegal. People discuss inheritance all the time. Maybe those conversations got misunderstood or taken out of context by Marcus, who's clearly trying to save himself by blaming me for his crimes. This framing attempted to characterize criminal conspiracy as merely theoretical discussion, as if planning a kidnapping was no different from casually wondering about inheritance timing. The agents immediately challenged this characterization by reading specific text messages that went far beyond hypothetical discussion. Messages detailing Nancy's exact routine, the layout of her home, the timing of when she'd be most vulnerable, and instructions about disabling security cameras were impossible to classify as theoretical conversations. How is Thursday night works best? She'll be alone and take sleeping pills at 10 p.m.'s a hypothetical discussion. The son-in-law squirmed uncomfortably before offering another carefully worded admission. I may have mentioned some details about Nancy's routine to Marcus, but I never explicitly told him to kidnap her. If he took information I shared and used it to commit a crime, that's on him. not me. I didn't authorize what he did. This attempt to claim plausible deniability, suggesting he provided information without explicitly ordering the kidnapping, showed the son-in-law desperately grasping for any narrative that might reduce his legal exposure. The agents countered by pointing to evidence of his active coordination after the kidnapping occurred. You received phone calls from the burner phone after Nancy was taken. You discussed the situation and what to do with her. You talked about the ransom not working and needing to figure out next steps. That's not someone who was surprised by a crime someone else committed. That's someone actively managing an ongoing criminal operation you orchestrated.